And joining us right now to talk about this and what we can expect as a result of this review from Chuck Hagel is Dick Morris. And Dick, it's great to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, John.
All right, so Rear Admiral John Kirby, the top Pentagon spokesperson or official who's dealing with this, said in a statement that the review would examine whether veterans' care meets the department's standards. Quote, "It is fair to say that Hagel ordered this review within the context of what's going on at the VA. To the degree we have similar issues, we do not know what we necessarily have, them. He wants to know and wants to attack them aggressively." Attack them aggressively, Dick, is that what's happening here?
Well, no, it's not. It's being treated episodically. That, oh, this guy did that and that guy did that, and oh, maybe the word got around and a bunch of other people decided to phony up their appointment books. What's increasingly emerging, and the Daily Beast released it today, is that this, one whistleblower called it, in effect, a crime syndicate, where everybody in the VA had to phony their appointment books, had to phony their waiting list periods. Apparently 50% of their bonuses were based on the waiting list information. And and that if you didn't do it, you wouldn't remain in office very long as a manager. And I think that this is a terribly dangerous situation. I think it could conceivably have gone all the way up to the top. But I think the real outcome of this is going to be privatization of the VA, where you take certain things that are crucial for the VA to do, like limb replacements or PTSD treatment, that they are uniquely qualified to do. But everything else, cancer, heart disease, all that stuff, you put into the private sector through Medicaid.
And do you think what's been announced so far, Dick, from the administration, the internal review from Rod Neighbors and the president's closest administration allies, as well as what's coming from the Pentagon, are these done specifically to try and head off more of a GOP-led congressional investigation into the VA?
Yes, I think they are, of course, but an investigation is inevitable with horror story piling upon horror story. The important thing about this politically is that this is a nonpartisan, non-ideological scandal that goes to lack of competence, lack of oversight, lack of involvement by the president with the second largest agency of the federal government, right after the Defense Department. The second largest is the VA with 300,000 employees. And you can believe that you can agree with Obama's policies, you can even praise aspects of his administration, you can be pro-choice and all the bit, but yet you can be turned off Obama by the way his incompetence was revealed by this scandal.
Let's ask about something with what Shinseki said, the Affairs Secretary Eric Shinseki. Said the fact there is evidence behooves us to take another thorough look. Now, let's first of all talk about those words, another thorough look, which means it's been done before thoroughly and they didn't find the problems that time. So now let's say we're facing another thorough look, and you mentioned the word privatization a few moments ago. So if we take another thorough look, all the investigations, the people that have to be involved, the systemic problems we have here, getting to privatization, Dick, how long is that going to take, and how many more lives can that cost?
Well, privatization can take 5 minutes. You just simply take people that are number 983 on the waiting list who are supposed to see their specialist, sometime in September, and you say, go see him next week and we'll pay the bill. And you can divert immediately huge numbers of people off these waiting lists to private clinical activities.
But that will take time, of course, after we have another thorough review.
Well, not if you do it right away. You could do it as an emergency matter immediately. I mean, if I were president, I would order an immediate clearing of that waiting list and take everybody that's on the waiting list and get them private care in a Medicare-approved hospital and just send the bill from Medicare to the VA and pay it. There's nothing long about that. What we have to realize here is this is a socialist government-run system fighting for its life. 300,000 people fighting to keep their prerogatives and their positions and their bonuses. And it's a system dedicated to its own perpetuation. Remember when Romney proposed privatizing the VA at a campaign stop in South Carolina in the last election? The Veterans of Foreign Wars was outraged, and he quickly pulled back off the position.
Well, now that window might be available because that seems to be one of the points talked about most as a possible solution to this, the privatization aspect on it. Dick, and let's leave the VA issue there for a moment. I want to also talk about your column real quick, which came out this week. And it talks about some of the key reasons why it's absolutely essential, in your opinion, that the GOP must win back control of the Senate in these midterm elections. And let's talk about the three things.
A lot of people have asked me, hey, come on, what good does it do if we win one house?
Well, let's talk. Let's go through some of these individually and start with the judicial nominees and why this is so important. Let's start there.
Well, Obama has done everything he can to stack the judiciary with liberal and radical judges who will okay his expansion of executive power. And by eliminating the filibuster, they're filling vacancies like crazy. But once the Republicans take over the Senate, you're probably going to have close to 100 judicial vacancies between then and the end of Obama's term. And you can either leave them vacant by refusing to confirm his nominees or get him to name some people who are just good judges without necessarily being good liberals.
All right. And let's also talk about the budget and the fact that the president does not have the option of a line item veto. Now, of course, the budget is somewhat of a pipe dream for a lot of folks here, but you say there's a real potential for the Republicans to have a serious impact on government spending if they get control of the Senate.
Yeah, if Republicans go in and say, we're not going to fund Obamacare, Obama will veto the budget, there'll be another government shutdown, and we'll be back where we were in October of last year. But the Republicans are not about, I think, to back off entirely. The smart thing to do would be to do a whole series of line item cuts and adjustments, none of which rises to the level that would trigger a presidential veto and a shutdown, but which nevertheless really go far toward implementing Republican ideas. For example, defunding the death panel that sets up Medicare rules.
All right.
Defunding the tax on medical devices, repealing that. You can do 80 or 100 of these and really make major changes without triggering a presidential veto.
And maybe the tax on the so-called Cadillac plan, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And don't forget, budget items don't need 60 votes. They need 51.
All right. A key point there also. One last thing, and I want to mention this specifically because the president talked about it today during his address at West Point. You say this is important, that the GOP take back control of the Senate because that will give them the opportunity to kill bad treaties, such as the UN Arms Trade Treaty we've talked about, and also the Law of the Sea Treaty. President Obama called for it to be ratified in his speech at West Point today. Talk about that.
Well, the Law of the Sea Treaty, which was signed 30 years ago and has never been ratified by the Senate, is a disaster. It essentially takes 70% of the Earth's surface covered by ocean and gives it to the United Nations for control. So, for example, if any oil company drills offshore, the UN gets to keep half of the royalties, half of the revenues, and it can then distribute it as it wishes. And whereas over 40% of the revenue would come from American offshore drillings, we get one vote out of 186 in deciding where that revenue would go.
All right, so there's potential for real damage, you say, with those
treaties. The other thing is Kerry is negotiating a global climate change treaty to try to implement by treaty what Congress has rejected. And the idea is to cut out the House and just get it through the Senate. Now, none of these treaties would be ratified, but under the Vienna Convention, if they are not ratified, they stay in force until they're actually rejected by the Senate. So Harry Reid's never going to bring them up. They'll never be rejected. They'll never be ratified, but they'll stay in force. If we take the Senate, we can bring them up, vote them down, and get rid of them.
All right, so key point there on those treaties as well.
Dick, 1 minute left. I need to ask you one quick question here on what President Obama said today at West Point. He said, in fact, by most measures, America has rarely been stronger relative to the rest of the world. Those who argue otherwise are either misreading history or engaged in partisan politics. Your reaction?
Ukraine. Do I need to say any more? If we're so damn strong, how come we're about to see 50 million people striving for freedom, hoping for it, demonstrating for it, voting for it, possibly subjugated under the heel of Russian imperialism and not being able to do anything about it because our military has become so weak? The other point I'd make is that it is not our capacities that are that weak. It's our president. Capacity doesn't mean much if the guy at the top won't use it.
Was there much meat on the bone today, Dick?
Well, I think that he's in a terribly defensive position, and he's trying to talk his way out of it. And I think we see increasingly foreign policy, which was a strength of his in the polling, is becoming a major negative because people can see how weak he is. In foreign policy, we get an opportunity to understand our president's personality in a way we never do with domestic politics. And the view that people are getting of Obama in foreign policy, as well as in the VA, is not an attractive one.
No, it's not, Dick, and the president clearly trying to answer those critics today with his speech, also talking about the idea of American exceptionalism, which he says he very much believes in. We'll have more analysis of the president's speech with Pete Hoekstra coming up after the break. Dick Morris, great to talk to you, and always great to get your analysis.
Thank you, John.
All right, look forward to talking to Dick again there. So, good take from Dick, and also very important will be see how Republican control of the Senate will change the tone and tenor of these investigations into the VA, into the IRS, et cetera, et cetera.
Set your watch. A lot of years to go on this.
Oh, certainly. More to come on America's Forum as well. We'll be back. We want to hear from you. You can reach out to us on social media. More to come after this break.